So if you're an Android phone fan, there's really no device that's any more anticipated right now than this, the new OnePlus 2. It's a $389 completely unlocked flagship level smartphone from the folks at OnePlus, and it's probably one of the most exciting Android phones we've played with to date. There's a lot going on in here, especially for a $389 smartphone. So let's start with the brains of the operation. In this case, that's going to be Qualcomm's Snapdragon 810 chipset. Now that's an octa-core chip, and it does come with 4 GB of RAM, which we're seeing on a lot of high-end smartphones these days. The combination, as you would expect, is a powerful one. I've been playing with this thing for about a week, and I haven't really been able to flummox it. I've been throwing games running at high visual quality on it. I've been swiping through apps and running through open ones like a crazy person. Issue is, you will occasionally see very brief flickers of slowdown, especially when you're launching apps cold. Don't really know what's going on here, but it isn't a deal breaker and it doesn't detract from the value of the phone at all. The version we're playing with does have 64 GB of internal storage, but bear in mind there is no expandable memory here. That's going to be a huge point of contention for some of you. Let's talk very briefly about the screen. We do have a 5.5-inch display here, and it is running at 1080p, so it doesn't quite get up to the quad HD levels we're seeing with other flagship smartphones, but for a phone at this price, you really cannot fault them for taking things a little easy on that front. Thankfully, colors are bright and really nicely saturated, if a little bit less saturated than what you see on, say, a Galaxy Note 5. Still very accurate and very attractive, but maybe not as punchy as you might expect. We do need to talk for a minute about the design of the OnePlus 2, and in broad strokes, it hasn't really changed much from the OnePlus 1. We still have the sort of trademark sandstone black finish on the back, but we do also have a metallic band that runs around the side that makes the phone feel a little more classy, a little more sturdy, more premium too. The biggest addition to the mix is front and center, and that's the fingerprint sensor that also doubles as a home button. Now, as a fingerprint sensor, it seems purely okay. If you sort of stick your thumb at it horizontally or from the wrong angle, it's very easy for the phone to say, no, I don't quite recognize that, and sort of leave you sitting there in confusion. I would say that's been the case for me for about 20% of the time, which isn't bad, but I'd like to see OnePlus sort of work on their accuracy down the road. The other thing sort of frustrating about the fingerprint sensor / home button is that it's just not all that sensitive as a home button. So you've got 2 soft keys to the left and the right. Those work at the slightest touch, so they would work just the way you expect them to on an Android device. Tapping the home button, though, doesn't always work. You have to press with just a little more pressure, and sometimes it just gets to be a bit frustrating. Now that we've taken apart the hardware, let's dig into the software a bit. It does run Android 5.1.1, and OnePlus has layered on top of it what they call their Oxygen OS interface. It's a very clean look. If you've used a Motorola device or a Nexus device before, this is going to feel very, very familiar. The biggest difference, and this is something you can enable in initial setup, is something called the shelf. So when you swipe over from the home screen, you do get access to a temperature readout, your frequently used apps, and frequently contacted contacts. You can also customize this with widgets that sort of live in this shelf as opposed to cluttering up your home screens. Beyond the shelf, we do have a couple screen gestures that could come in handy, and they do very clearly seem to come from Oppo's other phones. So drawing a circle on the screen while it's off, for example, will fire up your camera, while drawing a V will turn on a flashlight. There are a few more for music controls as well, but honestly, at that point, you might as well just use the on-screen buttons. Rounding out the package, we do have a 13-megapixel rear-facing camera on the back, obviously, and it is one of the better performers we've seen. It's not going to blow, say, the Galaxy S6 or its ilk out of the water, but it does do a very fine job, especially in bright light. One thing that really sort of rubbed me the wrong way about the camera situation is the fact that it does take a little bit too long to autofocus sometimes, and that's with the inclusion of a laser autofocus module under the camera itself. In the end, the OnePlus 2 has gotten plenty of people excited, and that's with good reason. This is by far one of the best cheap Android phones we've seen, especially when you're talking about something as high performance as this device. Is it going to be for everybody? No. But if you're a purist and you don't mind paying for an unlocked phone, this is probably the best you're going to do.